The phantom time hypothesis, a hidden truth in history. Throughout history, we've been taught that time follows an unbroken chain of events, each moment leading seamlessly to the next. But what if part of that chain was forged? In 1991, German historian Heribert Illig made a stunning claim. Nearly 300 years of medieval history were completely fabricated. His phantom time hypothesis suggests that the years 614 AD to 911 AD never actually happened. They were simply inserted into the record. But if this is true, where did those years go? Why would someone manipulate time on such a massive scale? And is it possible that other parts of history have also been rewritten without us knowing? The phantom time hypothesis posits that the period between 614 AD and 911 AD never actually occurred. According to Illig, the Holy Roman Emperor Otto III, Pope Sylvester II, and the Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII conspired to alter the calendar to make it appear as though 1,000 years had passed, when in reality, it had only been around 700 years. The theory suggests that these figures wanted to place themselves at the symbolic year 1000, which would align with Christian eschatology, the belief that the end of the world was near. To support this claim, Illig points to various anomalies in historical records, such as the lack of archaeological evidence to support the supposed historical events during this period and discrepancies in ancient documents. However, mainstream historians vehemently oppose this theory. They argue that evidence, such as writings, buildings, and artifacts, contradicts Illig's assertions. There are real-world anomalies that bring this theory into question. One of the most debated is the so-called Dark Ages, a period often described as lacking major progress in science, culture, or governance. Unlike the Roman and Renaissance eras, which left behind an abundance of records, much of the 7th to 10th centuries remains historically ambiguous. Could this gap in documentation indicate that these years never actually existed? Another peculiar example is the architecture of medieval Europe. Structures attributed to the early medieval period often resemble later medieval styles rather than distinct earlier designs. Could this be because those earlier years were retroactively inserted into the timeline? Even China's recorded history presents inconsistencies. The Tang dynasty, which supposedly ruled from 618 to 907 AD, has relatively fewer contemporaneous records compared to other dynasties. Could these missing records suggest that some of these years were added later? There's also the question of the Julian and Gregorian calendars. When Pope Gregory XIII reformed the calendar in 1582, only 10 days were removed to correct for inaccuracies. However, calculations suggest that, had the Julian calendar truly been in use since the time of Julius Caesar, 45 BC, a greater discrepancy would have accumulated. This has led some to wonder whether extra centuries were inserted into the historical record. What would the impact be if this theory were true? On a sociological level, the phantom time hypothesis brings into question how deeply human societies rely on the concept of time for social structure and organization. If we discovered that time was missing or manipulated, how would that affect our collective sense of progress? Consider this. Societies have built intricate systems of governance, education, and technology based on a timeline that could have been artificially constructed. The Gregorian calendar, which governs much of our modern world, is a product of centuries of scientific, political, and religious consensus. What happens if that very consensus is flawed? On a practical level, it would mean that entire social structures, like the development of medieval kingdoms, the spread of religions, and the Renaissance, might be seen in a completely different light. Our perception of cultural achievements and historical milestones would be under scrutiny. Could our current era also be subject to reinterpretation by future generations? It's an unsettling thought. Philosophically, the phantom time hypothesis raises profound questions about the nature of truth and knowledge. If time can be manipulated or misrepresented, what else about our reality is open to distortion? The concept of time is deeply entwined with human existence and identity. As Immanuel Kant once suggested, time is a framework through which we experience the world, but it's ultimately a construct of the human mind. What if this construct isn't as reliable as we think? The notion that a segment of history might be fabricated forces us to examine the boundaries of what we consider historical truth. Is history an objective recounting of facts, or is it something more fluid and shaped by those in power? And if we can manipulate history through time itself, what does that say about our control over other facets of our reality? On the psychological front, consider the profound disorientation that could arise from learning that chunks of our historical identity have been altered. Our personal identity is shaped by the past, by the stories, traditions, and events we believe have shaped us. If those events are suddenly proven false or manipulated, how would we cope? The psychological consequences could be staggering. It would challenge the very foundation of collective memory, which is essential for societal cohesion. We rely on shared narratives of the past to guide us toward the future. If these narratives are revealed to be fictions, we could face an existential crisis as individuals and as a society. Lastly, the economic implications of the phantom time hypothesis cannot be ignored. Much of our economic system, our markets, businesses, and innovations are rooted in historical milestones. Think about the enormous financial resources invested in historical preservation, research, and education. If large segments of history are fabricated, what does that say about the industries built around them? Moreover, economic models often rely on the past to predict future trends. If we find out that large swaths of our past are unreliable, how would that change our approach to economics? Could the world's major financial institutions, which rely heavily on the historical progression of time, be affected? So where does this leave us? The phantom time hypothesis invites us to rethink not just our understanding of history, but also our understanding of truth, time, and the very fabric of our reality. It challenges us to consider how much of what we take for granted as fact may be a carefully curated narrative. If history can be manipulated, how much of our past can we truly trust? Could the passage of time itself be more of a human construct than an absolute reality? And if large parts of history were indeed fabricated or forgotten, what does that mean for our present and future? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you're not subscribing to the Usafi channel, you're probably never going to see us again. But if you are, then congratulations, you're growing every day.